Hey, Helena. How's it going? My name is Alan. I'm here showing up as marketing, but my name is Alan. How's it going?
Good,
Great.
good.
And we have Justin as well. We're expecting Jim, but I think he's having some technical issues. So yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. But we can probably start with. We can.
Where are you?
I'm based in Costa Rica.
Where are you?
Yeah.
Oh, in Costa Rica. Are you there now?
San Jose.
Okay.
So yeah, Elena, where are you based?
In Byron Bay, Australia.
I met that place in 2015, I think. I have an aunt living there. Surprisingly, I'm originally from Uruguay, so yeah. I have an aunt living in Byron Bay. Yeah.
Oh.
Her name
what are
is.
Their names?
Yeah, her name is Christine. Christine Cobham.
Christine. She should come to our community screening here on Friday.
Awesome. So yeah, Elena, thanks so much. Do you pronounce your name Elena or Helena?
Well, in English, I tend to say Helena, but I'm Swedish, so it's more Helena in Swedish, which I can't say. Helena.
Okay.
That's fine.
Oh, this is Justin. He's one of our cooperative partners, and he helped put this event together. So yeah, here's Jim as well.
Hello, Helena.
Hello.
Oh gosh, I apologize for being late. I have a calendar, and I don't know what.
We're just starting. We're just starting the Q&A. So we just finished watching the movie. So yeah. So basically.
Wonderful.
Where are you, Jim? Where is Jim?
I'm in Orlando, Florida.
Oh.
Yeah. Yes, we're building an off-grid community here called Galt's Landing, in which we're demonstrating freedom. We've got thousands of perennial and annual. We're doing edible landscapes everywhere.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It's what I've been promoting for 45 years.
Thank you. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. So yeah, first of all, thank you everybody that joined. Yeah, we had a big audience, around 100 people. We had some technical issues that we couldn't load the video. The video is actually uploaded now, so we could have started again. No, I'm just kidding. So we watched it on YouTube, and yeah, it's a great video. Thanks so much, Elena, for putting it together. And basically, the way that this came about was that I got a message from Maura Gamble, right, the permaculturist in Australia. We collaborate with her because we have the Perma Youth Americas. She started Perma Youth with Maya, and we started Perma Youth Americas here with a group here. And so I received her messages, and she was promoting the event. And then I investigated about local futures, and the last blog post on the website was about food forest in your garden, and Jim and Food Forest Abundance was featured there. So I was like, whoa, this is a connection, this is a synchronicity right there. So I was like, well, the time that Morag is proposing to watch the movie is in Australia, so we can't really watch it ourselves. So let's do a screening for this side of the world. So
oh, good. I do have to stress it's very rough. It's a rough film. It's been compiled, from Zoom conversations, and the editing is not as smooth as it could be. But I stand by the message. It's the message we've been trying to get out for years, and it's great to have voices like Chomsky and Gabor Maté and so on. And we have much longer recordings of them, of course, but to try to squeeze in the big picture into 50 minutes is quite a feat. So I love honest feedback. So far I'm getting from some friends the honest feedback. You should not have put it out like that. It's far too rough. Why did you do that? And we were under time pressure. But sort of on YouTube and stuff, we seem to be getting almost only positive responses.
I think
I think people are hungry
Yeah,
for
the
this.
message resonates with a lot of people. So maybe Helena, do you want to talk about a little bit more about like local futures, a little bit like introduce your organization, and then we can go into the Q&A.
Yeah. Well, my sort of work started in a place called Ladakh, which is also has been called Little Tibet or West Tibet. It's about 40,000 square miles, a big area, the westernmost part of the Tibetan plateau. And that area was a kingdom. And later on, it was invaded by India. So it's belonged to India since the 1840s. But culturally, it was completely connected to Tibet. The Dalai Lama was the spiritual head. The monks from Ladakh went to, West Tibet to training in Lhasa, etc. And the architecture, everything, it's Tibet, basically. And this part of Tibet was spared, of course, colonialism, and even the earlier Christian missionaries had basically no impact on the culture. So it'd been allowed to flourish and develop according to its own values from its own land. And the amazing thing was that as late as 1975, it had been sealed off. So no one was allowed to go there because it was a sensitive strategic area for India. So I had this amazing experience of being asked to go out with a film team to do a documentary on this unknown place. I thought I'd be there for 6 weeks. I was a linguist. This is why I had been asked to join the film team. And I picked up quite a lot of the language very quickly and fell in love totally. This was a culture that was, indigenous in the sense of that place, of that land, with its Buddhist tradition going back thousands of years into an earlier, more nature-based Bon or, more shamanistic view. Essentially, deep balance with nature. The Buddhist message was one that everything is interconnected. Everything is a seamless web of relationships. Everything is in process. Very sophisticated worldview that quantum physics has now, proven to be right. And the most chilled out, the most equanimous people you will that I had ever met, that anybody has ever seen. So I ended up staying. I gave up my work in Paris. And it became obvious that this amazing, peaceful, by the way, also quite feminine culture, this culture was being invaded by a global economic system that was pressuring India, which had been non-aligned, but now going in the corporate direction. And I witnessed how almost overnight, through progress, through development, unemployment was created, had never existed. Poverty was created, had not existed in, poverty as we see it in the world today did not exist. Hunger, everywhere I went, there were about 100 villages strewn in this big area, what is essentially a desert. And people always talked about how we're tungbos, zabos, which means we have plenty to eat and drink. You must stay in the winter. The winter is our favorite time because that's when we have all these festivals. I didn't particularly like the winter because it dropped to -40, but they weren't at all concerned about that, very adapted to this environment. So I could go on forever. I've written a book. It's called Ancient Futures. I do recommend it. And I would argue that what I say in that book, and I had already started saying in many public lectures around the world, starting in the 70s. So this was in the mid-70s that I had my eyes open to another reality. I had grown up as not a typical Western. I'm Swedish, English, partly German. I had lived in America. I'd had a lot of international experience. And I spoke about 6-7 languages at that point. And so I really thought I knew the world. But what Ladakh opened my eyes to was another reality. It's the reality of being closely connected in community and to the land. And that reality is what I've been trying to explain to people, is what can help us regain our humanity, who we really are. We are by nature creatures that want to belong. Every child that's born wants to feel loved and wants to feel respected, wants to feel heard. What we need for that is more human scale structures. We need to allow people to organize themselves into groups where we have more agency over our lives and where we see the impact on other people and on nature. The impact that we have when we try to gather our basic needs, our food, clothing, shelter. We have been imprisoned in an economic system that started with slavery, genocide, and enclosures in Europe. Fundamentally, what modern progress has been about has been to push us away from the ability to provide for ourselves in our own regions. And I do want to really stress that also for the permaculture movement, it's important to know that we did not do that as isolated individuals. We didn't do that on, 1 acre plots in a nuclear family. A big lesson for me, particularly over the years, has become that many Westerners who try to go back to the land, try to regain that deeper, connected, spiritual and practical relationship with life, so often they didn't learn that bigger lesson from sustainable cultures that had survived for thousands of years, because they lived in groups and they knew that it takes at least 10 or 20 live-in caretakers for every baby, for that baby to have that sense of being held and cared for. When we create a nuclear family, we're creating a completely unnatural structure that creates intense pressures on both parents and children. And there's so much more I could say about that, because this isolation into nuclear families, which obviously doesn't work, which is why we now have the divorce rate we have, the single families. It doesn't work because it creates this bipolar relationship of expectation that one person is going to give us all that we need. So the minute someone is more engaged with work or tired or anything, the insecure person will pressure more. It's a completely unstable relationship. What we had in our evolution was the stability of being in a basket of relationships so that there was not that intense pressure on anybody. And that is, I better not elaborate on it too much, but it's one of the most important.
This is the most incredible elaboration. I love this.
Great. Well, I'm glad. Well, it's coming from experience, it's coming from what's been imprinted in my body and soul of how I felt living there, how I felt living where I was using my body more, how I felt living in a culture where there were no mirrors, where there were no cameras, where I never got to see myself on a screen as I do now and feel self-conscious. I was seen by other people and I was seeing them. And it was maybe one of the key elements of this for children is that they grew up basing their sense of self and identity on living human beings to whom they were close enough to know that nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfectly beautiful. Nobody stays the same. Nobody's afraid of aging because life is change. And nobody is afraid of the reality of being imperfect, of being vulnerable. This is the hideous tragedy that's happened in the West. And I must say, in my experience as a young person living in Sweden and then coming to America, I would say that even within the Western world, the differences between cultures in this regard were quite clear, that in cultures that had been more subjected to the pressures of a global corporate economy, the insecurity, the depth of the loss of self-esteem, the inability to just be yourself and to feel that you have to put on the show to be perfect, the pressures on every child to be famous in order to be someone. Now, this modern incarnation of the global economy was really starting to happen when I experienced its sort of entrance into Ladakh. I saw how literally food that had been transported for weeks, like butter that had been transported by truck from India for 2 weeks over the high Himalayan passes into Ladakh, delivered butter at half the price of butter from a 2-minute walk down from the marketplace. You know, and I started looking at this. I was later on doing public talks and writing a book which was translated into more than 40 languages. I was invited to Mongolia, to Kenya, to to interact with the Maasai and so on. And I sort of kept my eyes open, and I saw that in Mongolia, where they had 25 million milk-producing animals, and you could never run out of dairy products, you couldn't buy them in Ulaanbaatar. They were from literally from the other side of the world, most of it from Germany. And I was served at a conference in Ulaanbaatar, I was served water in little plastic containers, bottled by Coca-Cola in Hong Kong. Now that's the world that's been created through the modern incarnation of a system that started with force. People were pushed away from producing a range of products for their food, their fiber, their housing, pushed away from that to go into monocultures, produce cotton for slave traders on the other side of the world, produce tea, coffee, go into mines, force, genocide, and explicit misogyny as well was part of the foundations of this modern global economy. In Europe, the enclosures, same thing, driven away from the land into Dickensian London, where our metric for progress starts. We're told, look at the filth, look at the illness, look at the horrible conditions. We do not have, we do actually, but we're not allowed to learn about them. The studies that looked at what life was like when people were allowed to be organized into interdependent social networks, managing the land, managing the animals in a deep, interconnected way. And that we don't hear about, especially since the early 80s, when the modern form of globalization was really taking off. It started very clearly after the Second World War with the Bretton Woods institutions. When the IMF and the World Bank were set up, they also set up something called the GATT, which is the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. And so for me and my network, which was from the non-Western world, most of them, when I realized I had been in Ladakh, I had seen, the craziness of butter, selling for half the price, destroying the local economy, creating unemployment, poverty, and violent conflict between local people who lived peacefully side by side for generations. Now suddenly differences of any kind, in this case it was Buddhist and Muslim, became a battle line, and they were literally killing each other. I was invited to work in Bhutan, where Hindus and Buddhists had lived side by side for generations, and again, violent conflict, because the modern economy, as what it did also with colonialism and so on, it created this urban stranglehold, masters far away, unseen, and created the scarcity of jobs. And because all resources had to go through the hands of the traders who were making money out of everything, because it had to go through those hands, the resources became scarce as well. And when you were in this urban environment, you had no access to water, to land, to actually get your needs met. Suddenly you were dependent now on money doled out by the same global empire.
Yeah.
And that money now meant you didn't know if a loaf of bread tomorrow was going to cost 10% more, 20% more, maybe 50% more. In England now, the energy prices are going up 100%, almost overnight.
Yeah.
And you have no control over that. So of course you become greedy. Of course you want to hoard money.
Scarcity.
So the greed we see in this structure is completely natural human response to an unnatural situation. And so really what I want to say is that we should be so clear that to strengthen the permaculture movement, and I prefer to call it the localization movement, because until now, what localization is embracing is something broader. It's very clearly embracing an economic trajectory, a political trajectory, social one, that sees that the relationship to the land, and particularly to food and farming, is essential and fundamental But so the broader localization path is what we've been trying to promote. And what we saw, is after the Second World War, with the GATT being set up, unfortunately, many people on the left focused on the World Bank and the IMF, but they had a narrow view that usually came through national lenses. It did not include a deeper psychological, spiritual, ecological foundation. It was only about justice. It wasn't questioning the path of progress, which had always, as I say, been through this global system where the masters were pushing people on one side of the world to become slaves on monocultures and into factories to be cheap labor. Later on, the money in the industrializing world went up, and we were told that living conditions improved. But from our perspective, the living conditions, which moved into more and more narrow, nuclear, urban, competitive places of scarcity and competition, life wasn't improving. And what was held up all the time were the super rich who were idealized, and more, propaganda. You too can be a globally famous billionaire. But in the meanwhile, the majority were getting poorer and poorer. So I'm probably, should I say?
That's great. Maybe, thanks so much, Helena. Yeah, I so much agree. I'm even seeing that in my neighborhood, the segregation, right? The kind of like learn the segregation. So yeah, maybe Jim, you can take it away and like talk a little bit about Food Forest Abundance and like the direction that we're going with the organization.
Oh, actually, one thing I should do, which I'm so bad at, this is typical. So what I do is try to share the perspective that I learned, a global perspective from a lot of international experience. But I don't talk about my own organization. And I must do that. I must promote my own organization because we are doing a great job trying to get this bigger picture out. But we really need support. We need help. We need more people basically getting the big picture and helping to spread the valuable tools we've created that can really help people to see more clearly the need for a community-based approach. Change the I to a we. Join into a group. And the foundational group that I urge everyone to join into, again, I'm getting into the issues, but anyway, is to create a deep sharing group where we also start healing emotionally and psychologically. If you look at AA, which Russell Brand now is so wonderfully also sharing with the world, the AA has been so successful in reversing entrenched terrible addictions to violence, to sex, to drugs, to alcohol, because it's a group path, it's a we path, and it's linked to a spiritual message that underlines the connectedness of all life. It tends to be mainly Christian. I prefer to go to the universal spirituality. The universal spirituality is the nature spirituality, is the life spirituality, that all of life is sacred, human and non-human, but also human. We mustn't demonize the human. The whole Anthropocene discourse is not healthy. It's buying into a corporate demonization of human beings, as we try to show in the film. So Local Futures, we have books, we have films, and we have a localization action guide. We're doing an ongoing project now called World Localization Day, which is trying to help get the voices out from the people on the ground that are actually demonstrating the most remarkable benefits. Sometimes within 2 years, you can see landscapes, I see it all around the world. Landscapes that were dead, flourishing. Human beings who were dead, depressed, suffering from all kinds of trauma, healed through the path of reconnection, which is the path of localization. So we have lots of material. We have a very holistic, broad view. So we're coming at this from a global perspective to build a global movement. It's not coming from a place that the corporations are actively trying to to create, which is divisiveness. They're trying to place localization as selfish, narrow, white people who are just concerned with their middle class lives. There's huge propaganda against it because it's very threatening.
Yeah.
And this is why we were shadow banned by Facebook. We had our film, The Economics of Happiness, really caught on. We had 1,000 people a day joining, and then suddenly just stopped. We didn't know what had happened, but that's what happened. So we have to try every way we can to get out this common sense message that is so healing and that is so positive and so uniting. And I hope people will come to our website, localfutures.org, and that you'll join us for World Localization Day next year and become part of a global community. Thank you.
Wow. That is so powerful and so fantastic. I have to take a few breaths to gain my composure. I would like to invite you to speak to hundreds of millions of people here in the next week. Our intention, and we've got a fairly solid strategy for this. We have created a series of strategic sessions that we're going to hold on the night of the 2nd, the day of the 3rd, and the morning of the 4th of July. And then we are going to, and by the way, they include David Holmgren and Greg Nibbs and Darren Olien, who I just got off the phone with, and Andy Wakefield and Foster Gamble. And we're all coming together to speak about exactly what you're speaking about. It's about think global, act local. And the foundation of this is permaculture. I was just had a 2-hour podcast with Paul Check. He's now joining us as well. So we've got these incredible people with platforms, and it's all about awareness, because when people hear what's possible and that resonates with them, they will choose the better choice, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's the number one presupposition of life, is everybody does the best they can with what they're aware of. And most people aren't aware of the possibilities that you just expressed so beautifully. I'd like to invite, go ahead.
Yeah, I lost you for a minute.
Yeah, I lost myself for a minute. Yes, what you just expressed, I'd like to invite you to this group and to share what you just shared, and then what we're doing. And this is where it gets very exponential, very explosive, is where Sayer G is now part of this as well. And he's got a platform it was called Be Sovereign, and he's now calling it Unite. And also Foster Gamble's entity, the Thrive Solutions Hub, we are going to basically take all of these strategy sessions, these talks, and we're going to put them out through a live stream on the 4th of July, and which here in the United States, of course, is the Independence Day. So we're thinking strategically about how to reach the most people. And then we're live streaming this, and then we're also recording it, and we're sending it out through everybody. And the solution is embarrassingly simple, as Bill Mollison says, right? The solution is go in, raise up the vibration, faith and courage, take out the poisons, replace them, supplant them with logical, nature-given solutions. And so that's what we're demonstrating. That's what our whole network is about expressing what's possible and demonstrating what's possible in a way that encourages, inspires, and empowers the average, and there's no average, but the person who owns a suburban backyard to go out in their backyard and plant seeds and grow food outside their back door. When we transition, when we inspire 50% of the 40 million acres of lawn in the United States, which takes more poisons and resources than any other crop, and we inspire people to grow food, which is good for them as individuals, as families, as communities, and as the world, this is the simple solution that changes everything. And it's mass adoption is what we're going for, because that's what we need, right? As Goethe said, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. When we can express that in a way where people realize, which is the apocalypse, which is the realization, the unmasking, that we have been slaves to the marketers, to the mind control, to the governmente. Govern is the control and mente is mind. When we say, okay, wait a minute, now that I realize what's happening. So anyway, I'm kind of going on, but I would love, we would love to share your message with everybody that we can share it with.
Great. Well, we just, we need to try to get it out as much as we can. And I think we need also maybe to try to find what becomes very problematic when you're trying to, reach many people, and particularly working globally as we are. We have to think of ways that we also have to have representation so that we can, have real discussions, because if it's too big, like I doubt that in this thing on 4th of July, I'm not going to be speaking to Foster and it won't be possible to actually communicate as such. So it's a very...
Yes, it will, actually.
Will it? I think, yeah.
No, they're a part of this. And we're together. We're going to have strategy sessions where we're all talking, and that's a smaller group. And then we're going to take what we've talked about, and we're going to edit that into a 3-hour live stream. So it's going to be, David Holmgren. And,
how many people are going to be in that conversation then? Well,
there's going to be about 30 people in the 4 different strategy sessions, not all at once.
Okay. So, and you mean 30 different ones? In each one, there'll be different people.
Yeah. Well, yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And then we're going to take the total message and we're going to put it out. And I imagine that I'll be getting a call from Joe Rogan any minute now or any day now. I imagine Russell Brand will call, Vandana Shiva, who is one of my heroes, and many more. And we're going to then live stream this. Have you ever seen Guy Fawkes in V for Vendetta, where he took over the TV channels?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Same philosophy. We're going to basically be going out in such a massive way to so many people that people are going to see it.
Yeah.
And it's going to create this energy explosion of positive energy that is going to, and by the way, we're going very direct. Like I'm going direct and I'm calling out Elon Musk and Warren Buffett and the corporations and the religions and the military and the educational system in a way that's very logical. We have politicians that are joining us that are running on the campaign of permaculture, of using the people's resources wisely instead of watering ornamentals and lawn and using taxpayer dollars to poison our land and our water and our air. We're going to use those same dollars, which I don't believe in taxation is theft anyway, but when we have the element, right, and we can combine the elements and we can use those resources in a way that actually provides life, then we're gonna share that message in a way that's, when people hear it, they'll say, I can't believe I didn't think of that. And they'll say, that makes sense. And that's the seed. And we're going to plant those seeds, and then we're going to nourish those seeds together and give context from different directions.
Well, what do you say? One thing that slightly worries me about permaculture is also now sort of your emphasis on the lawn and the, planting the lawn with food, which I think is absolutely essential and important. But when it comes to the food supply and the, what's been going on is happening with farming. And we try to show in the film, this absolute, takeover basically. So all the prices are fake. The price of labor is artificially high. We don't touch all of that in the film, but there are certain basic truths about the way the economic system operates. And you're tending to talk more about the government. And I see the government as being now subservient to what is actually a de facto global empire or government. There is a governance structure out there now of interlinked corporations and a financial casino. So, we should be thinking much more about how BlackRock and so on have accumulated all the money. And it's really also a very important distinction to broaden the movement, because we need to get beyond a sort of a conventional left. We need to get beyond also when we focus on government, people are trapped in what is actually an artificial theater of left, right. Left and right in virtually every country, including Sweden, have been supporting the same fundamental path. And all of that has been towards centralizing power by supporting the global players. And by the time they had fossil fuels as part of that game, see, a lot of good thinking new economies think that Franklin Roosevelt and that what was happening after the war was actually quite a good thing. It was better than blatant, rape and rape through colonialism and so on. That it was actually still fundamentally continuing to urbanize and centralize power and into global hands. And those who were active globally were getting richer and richer. And there was a lot of well-intentioned people who joined the whole Bretton Woods thing with the idea, we've got to do this to prevent another world war, to prevent another depression.
It's always fear that they use. Go ahead.
But you see, the problem is that today, too many people look at the system as it is today, and they just talk about Klaus Schwab or Bill Gates or about their government. They're not looking at the historical trajectory. They're not looking at how virtually everybody in academia has been supporting unwittingly this path. I'm meeting young architects in architecture school. They're being told, we've got to go high rise, urban high rise. Too many people. So one of the things we didn't cover in the film is the key issue, which is that we are on an overcrowded planet, no doubt, overcrowded in many parts of the world. What do we have? We have an overabundance of a renewable resource, which is human beings, which is human intelligence, human eyes, human hearts, human hands. And we should be choosing right now, every step of the way, to find creative and meaningful ways for people to organize themselves so that it's a human scale and primarily human trajectory. So for me, in Foster Gamble's Thrive, there is this talk about the potential for infinite energy without cost. For me, that's based on not having lived in an indigenous culture where I realized how much happier I was because I was moving and I was using my body. Now they're talking about sitting has become the new smoking. We have bad backs, we have bad health, and I'm not out in the garden all the time. I'm sitting in front of the screen a lot of the time because we have a big job of educating. So we need to be educating with the vision that we don't need more technology. We actually don't need more energy than we could have from simple renewable energy technologies that we also demonstrated in both Ladakh and Bhutan. Much simpler ways are actually more sophisticated because they're working with the complexities of living.
They're the ultimate technology. They're the technology of nature, of source, of God. Everything you're saying, I agree 100%. And when I throw out certain names, the reason that it's so exciting that all of these people are collaborating is because we have one common goal. It's to learn from each other, to observe and interact and say, wait a minute, that makes sense. Oh, that makes sense. And then when we bring this together and when we bring our networks together and when we focus on one single step right? The next step in this journey towards freedom starts with faith and courage and an inspired vision. It's an energetic shift, starting energetically, and then that energy will lead to action. And then action.
But when you say starting energetically, I'm forever, since I came back from Ladakh, I've been warning of spiritual seekers who are saying it starts on the inside. And I was saying, well, actually, my experience now, that's what I had learned in psychology and everything, and I believed. But now I've come back to say, actually, the structures, the scale, the external systems that we relate to have a absolutely fundamental effect on the inner. So in fact, it's again, so what I saw happening in the early stages as people were picking up meditation and so on, they'd be sitting in a high-rise cement environment, meditating for hours a day, and it wasn't actually creating a more peaceful world. It was helping them. I'm totally in favor of meditation. But I'm saying that I've always been trying to emphasize that it starts with both the outer and the inner. So, you said it starts with this energetic thing. I would say it starts just as much with a vision, with the inspired vision that can resonate with the inner and can resonate, and it's a sort of chicken and egg. That's all. I just want to keep emphasizing as holistic as possible a view, and I think as realistic as possible.
Realistic is a word that I don't align with, simply because I believe whatever the man or woman can conceive and believe it can achieve. And I am so excited that we're talking about this, because this is the type of collaboration, the type of conversation. When we add this to the mix, it's so profound.
Yeah, I would love to have more conversations about that, because I worry about people having been taken down a path, both through how conscious is so hard to know, but when you look at the trajectory, I saw that through postmodernism in academia, people were told that there is no such thing as reality. Don't talk about male and female being different. If you do, you're an essentialist, and that's very bad. So people were being pushed into no such thing as a biological reality. And then on the other side, in science, the biological reality was reduced down to, bombarding genes, literally bombarding them with, billion-dollar technology to study life in this unnatural condition in order to produce products that would generate profit for corporations. So the whole academic thing was moving towards for profit. But in the meanwhile, I would say, again, there is no such thing. The deepest quantum truth is there is no such thing as a real thing. Well, I don't know. Maybe the listeners don't want this.
My point about the reality is, I very much see that when we come together with a message that's inspiring and empowering, and that people can relate to and take action upon, then when we do that in a very strategic way with enough people sharing the message, then it will affect the masses, because there's a tipping point. There's the pioneers, the early adopters, and mass adoption. We're way past the pioneers. We're into the early adopters, and we're not very far from mass adoption of the most logical thing we could ever do. And that's what permaculture represents, is the most logical thing we could ever do. So my point of realisticness is, are we going to be able to change the world radically and wonderfully and lovingly very quickly? I think we can.
Well, I definitely think it's possible, but I think the big block is how we reach people, because we've got that. Been colonized. Huh?
And we've got that. We know how to reach billions of people now. We have the technology and the ability and the networks, as long as we do it strategically. So that's together, we can reach billions of people in the next 3 months with a similar message. And that's one of self-reliance. That's one of community and commune and local. Well, local networks is where it's all at, and you've already.
There's a question from somebody in the audience saying, like, is there a list? Maybe Helena, like if there a list of like kind of like local farmers. This specific question is for the US, but like that people can like tap into. I think like maybe those networks are being built. There's not really a database that I know, at least, but maybe of resources. So people, because I think like farmers can start creating like a community. Of course, farmers markets could be a start, but
that's right. Well, there definitely are resources, and it's an incredible job to try to bring them together. Our localization action guide is actually fairly focused on America, because we're actually a registered charity in America. That's where we started. I was teaching at the University of Berkeley, and so that's where our office was for many years. And so but you would need to be looking at your particular region. There's now actually someone is setting up a World Association of Farmers Markets around the world, it's a good idea. And I do want to urge people interested in permaculture to expand their vision to look at the local food movement, which is broader. It includes permaculture, but it includes this wonderful, the most wonderful thing about for me is when the permaculture vision inspires farming. And so you get farmers very small, the best, like 5 acres are some of the jewels that I know of in the world, where on 5 acres they are growing everything imaginable, including having animals, and including even for their own farm, creating enough biofuel out of their own products for their own little machinery. So that almost everything, animals, biofuels, everything can be fine on a small scale. When it gets into the hands of a for-profit global prison, which is squeezing people everywhere, the middle classes are getting poorer, as we try to show in the film briefly. So anyway, so there is a beautiful thing happening. I've seen, it's happening in America, it's happening in Japan, it's happening in England, and it's and then also where permaculture interacts with the eco-village movement. I was one of the founders of the Global Eco-Village Network. So working with that marriage between permaculture and eco-villages has also been really wonderful. And all of it represents localization. And that's where I think what I would like to add to your discussion is, if you like, also the politics. A lot of permaculture people shy away from that, but I really think we're getting close enough now to having a vision where there will be a people's movement for a new economy that will completely transform politics. So the number one thing we have to be aware of is that it's the economic system that's running the world. The global economic system is running the world. And what does that mean? Algorithms that cannot respond to diversity. They can't respond to the uniqueness of each plant, of each human being, it's monstrous. It's BlackRock. Yeah.
BlackRock is not just the name, it's the intent. So we are actually designing, as part of this strategy, a political campaign that will win every election, because when it's spoken in a strategic way. So for instance, here, we're bringing Chris Messina to the event, and we're going into a local, we're actually using a church community. We're bringing in this pastor who's got a lot of people in his community, and we're bringing in social media influencers, and we're going to be installing a food forest on video, and we're going to be demonstrating and showing and talking with the community about what this means for them, which it'll raise the value of the entire community. And then Chris Messina, who's got if he wins his election as mayor of Orange County, he'll have a $5.5 billion annual budget. When he spends that, which is supposed to be our money, of course we know that it's really not, but when he has control of that and he spends it wisely, it's a model. And this is just a tip. We haven't even got into the wisdom of yourself and all of these other collaborators. When we combine our wisdom to create this strategy, This will win every political election, from the HOA president to presidents of countries.
I think it's possible. I really do. And we need to work for it. It's so common sense. It's so inspiring.
Yes.
It's about who we are. It's who we
Yes.
are. It's about coming back to who we are.
Yeah.
And most people, if they can just take a breath and listen and have a bit of, and that's where the internet is not the ideal communicator.
No.
It's very speedy. It's very, but if they can just pause, look at the big picture, and then listen to their own bodies and hearts. I know people will resonate.
There's a question which is, I guess, for everybody here, like that came up, like what is the first step for people to get involved? I guess there are the websites of Local Futures and Food Forest Abundance, but what would you recommend?
Well, I recommend that the first thing they should do is try to identify a few like-minded people and people they sort of resonate with near them. So that for years, we started doing that already, in the 70s, encouraging people to get together in these circles and to connect enough to change the I to a we, and then go on a journey both of deeper sharing and of big picture research. In other words, to really try, what we're offering is basically a paradigm and lots of materials that we can justifiably say can help you heal individually and rapidly and help to heal the planet. And that's what we're offering. But for you to actually see how that all connects into a vision and why local is a fundamental element. And that means we have to understand that the globalizing path has been the centralization, the urbanization, the removing from nature, the mind pressures that have overdeveloped the left brain. We have literally damaged our brains because we haven't been able to develop as full human beings. We've been thwarted in developing our real heart and concern, but it's there, it's in all of us. And so once we are awakened to who we really are through the big picture and see how that connects to a path forward, which is human scale, we have to understand that the global system is an inhuman machine now. Yes, and I really urge people not to focus much on individuals. This is a very tragic part of the Western world. Let's look at the vision, the picture, and it's not about adoring or idealizing particular individuals, nor about demonizing others. It's about really being clear about the paradigm and the path, and waking up to the fact that we are often unconsciously supporting a path now into AI dominated cities where we will be like prisoners in a world where we will not ever see anything real, anything natural. It's dead. It's dead like a McDonald's restaurant compared to a family-owned, unique restaurant in any place on this planet. The local, relating to local circumstances, to the living local fabric, is vibrant, is alive, keeps us alive. And that's true of the actual food, that has energy and vibrates when it comes more directly. And this is why shortening the distances, which is again fundamental to localization, shortening the distances between production and consumption is so important. But I feel that, so the first step, get together, even if it's just 2 or 3 people, up to maximum probably 20, so that you can have one conversation, and then start doing the deeper sharing and healing. And that means being able to be vulnerable. It means being really aware how afraid we are of expressing the truth about the problems we experience. Maybe we have an addiction. Maybe our daughter is addicted. Maybe we've, whatever it is. And doing that as a joint coming together and deeply getting to know each other, having conversations that are so different from the typical, cocktail party. Oh, what's the important thing you're doing? And oh, I'm so important because I'm writing a new book, or I've got a new car, or my child is doing so well in school. It's all about showing off, and learning instead what it means to actually share and be who we are. One way also that I learned from indigenous culture is that people used to dance, sing, and make music together, not a star singing for others, not a global star and millions of spectators. That keeps both the stars and the spectators actually deeply unhappy. But when we come together in an imperfect way and dance and sing, and you can still see it in more traditional cultures, it's being so heavily destroyed by the mass media. And children are being made to feel that singing their own songs or dancing their own dances is primitive and backward. And I was even saying to a friend today, I would love to bring more dances here, even as we used to do when I was growing up in Sweden, where old and young together would do these simple dances, and in a way quite silly, and singing together. But it's unbelievably enjoyable, and it's good for us. And it's also a way of doing things where old and young join in together. Anyway, we must. Are there some other questions?
Great. There's another question regarding the kind of like the cryptocurrencies. So there's some cryptocurrencies that are done for uniting communities, really, to create unions in communities. So what do you think about kind of like the divergence of like the online cryptocurrencies to creating like kind of like an online community of people that think the same way versus the local movement?
I'm very aware that we need to use technology to come together as we are now. But for me, the fundamental need is to try to share a vision of genuine localization as the way that we evolved and as that we must go back to. And I do not see any need whatsoever for a cryptocurrency to do that. I think that we're getting into the belief that we are going to know each other well enough through the screen that we really can create reliable and robust, as people like to say, resilient systems. We, in our work, having awakened to the need to localize, we were promoting local currencies going back 20, 30 years. I worked with the first economist who took local seriously. His name was Richard Douthwaite. And he wrote a book, by the way, called Short Circuit, which was all about localizing. And his focus was on currencies. And my focus, because of the indigenous experience, was on food, on actually rebuilding the local structures that could enable us to be interdependent, genuinely interdependent, and through the strength of that community fabric. And the wisdom that comes from being in tune with the specifics of the local diversity. Anyway, I have to say that we started one in Berkeley called BREAD. It was Berkeley Regional Economic, what was it anyway? It ran about 10 years. And there was one quite famous local economy system in Ithaca. It was called Ithaca Hours. I don't know if you've heard of it. And my conclusion already after about 20 years was that the currencies were not working that well because they demanded a very radical commitment. And very often it was people who were more, were willing to jump into that. But very often they weren't able to do anything but use it for babysitting, for sharing a car, whatever, things that you could do just out of community spirit anyway. But they couldn't pay their rent, they couldn't buy the food for it. So in terms of the basic things, it really wasn't operating. Then recently, a friend of mine who's in the film, the former mayor of Bristol in England, he started a local currency. And Bristol is a big city with 650,000 people. And I thought, well, maybe now I should start supporting local currencies. But I would say, he probably wouldn't like me saying this, but I would say it hasn't really worked. And what has worked, like if you go to Bristol, you'll see this thriving local food economy now with all kinds of initiatives. And I'm very proud to say that we actually helped to get that whole thing rolling in the early 90s. But it's sort of, and I think with what we will come back to is more localized currencies. It has to be. And it could be that once we have layers of real decentralized, empowered structures feeding into larger affiliations, that we might have a global currency for certain needs, maybe. But actually, the absolute urgent need is to rebuild more of the local relationships, and I don't think that cryptocurrencies are going to help that. They're not needed. Let's just go ahead and print that paper money that we did in the past, and some people are still doing. Why do we need crypto? Why do we need? We should remember what we said earlier about we should now be looking at everywhere it's possible to employ more people rather than employ energy and technology. So for me, you know, the way the internet forced us into now writing, so that every time we write, we're using scarce, very high level energy, very, very expensive energy. We used to be able to take a pencil and a piece of paper. You can make paper anywhere in the world. You can make a pencil of a million different kinds anywhere in the world, and you go sit under a tree and write. Now you're connected to this whole network. Every time you send an email, you're using as much energy as when you boil a cup of tea. It's so wasteful. It's vastly more costly environmentally than when we've ever been allowed to know. The mining that goes on to keep this stuff going. And we need to use it now for sure for communication. But let's not use it if there are other ways of doing things, like the currency. That's what I would say. But wow. I know there are a lot of idealistic people who are banking on cryptocurrencies and blockchain. And so there are a lot of, you know, particularly in the new economy movement, you know, they're mostly men, unfortunately. I think women are not so enamored of technology generally.
Yeah. And there's so much gambling and gaming in the system. Really, most people that are into that are in it for one reason. It's not to produce any value, it's to make money.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that our network is working on is a digital asset that's farmed, that actually is directly linked to food production, and that incentivizes collaboration and creates local community. And it's
that's going on right here, right now too, with a lovely young guy who's just creating a web-based local exchange system that's going on. Again, I would say, why use that scarce energy, and why do something that does make us more vulnerable in terms of surveillance? You know, there are ways of building systems that would be much more direct, but maybe, it could be that, but I haven't seen it yet. I tell you, I've known a lot of people who have tried to make use of the internet as a way of building this. It actually started out of Canada. I knew him well. What was his name? Let's. Local exchange and trading systems. Again, internet-based.
Yeah.
And, none of it has taken off. And all I can tell you, I don't want to sound arrogant, is that on this journey now for 45 years, the number of attempts to do this different currency, whether it was printing the paper very locally or counting hours, or Let's, which was via the internet, none of it has taken off the way local food systems have. Yeah. I can point you to, it's so wonderful because there's so much more happening than we can keep track of. It's like the local food stuff is real, it's concrete, it heals the earth.
It's
about
the foundation.
It's about life. And that is happening without these currencies.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just worry about people investing too much of their energy in the tech side of it and not enough in the earth side and the community side.
The tech side might go bye-bye in the very near future, for a lot of different reasons. It's really, I'm so thankful for everything you're talking about. And beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you. So do we
Well,
have more questions or?
I think
Yeah,
we're good with questions right now, unless anybody else wants to ask. But yeah, I think also we're like at the top, or a little bit over the top of the 2 hours of the show. So
yeah,
of the show
yeah.
of the meeting. Yeah,
We're
exactly.
losing people. Yeah, so
Thanks so much, Helena, for
so
joining us, and
Jim,
Jim as well. And yeah, if you
yeah,
guys have some last words, go for it.
Yeah, Helena, I would love to chat with you as soon as possible about, well, maybe however you want, but let's communicate and let's, I would love to share your message with our entire network. Like we're already doing, but expanded.
Yeah, I would love to. I would absolutely love. The timing of your various sessions are quite difficult for me, you know, this next thing.
Yeah.
So how could I do it without
If you could just do a 15 to 20-minute talk to our, to just whatever you want to say, just you, and record it, then we could put that into the.
Oh, that would be great.
Okay.
I'll do that. 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And then we might use 5 or 10 depending, but we will for sure bring you and your message to as many people as we possibly can.
Great. Thank you. And you and I can have more, and Alan, we can have more conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we're just getting started, and I want to learn from you. I've got some ideas too. I think because I've been obsessed with this, and then recently joyfully obsessed, because that's an energetic shift that made all the difference. I was obsessed out of scarcity, out of fear, and now I realize that scarcity and fear is the problem, is the slavery, right? And then I let that go, and now there's miracles happening all day long, every day.
I'm sorry about always having a comment on everything, but I just want to say that I have also felt that there's a real problem with people who only want to focus on the positive. So when I'm trying to encourage, and again, I just so believe the holistic approach. And so I do feel there is I've often, in fact, it's been going on, I've been saying it for, again, about 40 years, that we need to practice this sort of creative schizophrenia, in that for part of the day or part of the year, part of the time, we need to not lose sight of the trajectory that is continuing to take us away from nature, away from life, and killing the planet. And it's a system. It's not just Bill Gates. It's a worldview, and it's not just a worldview. It's backed now by this artificial money that's being created. So there's this huge machine churning away in the wrong direction. It's inhuman.
It's called Aladdin. It's got a name.
It's just like,
it's more than that. It's bigger than
that. But to understand that better. And so with Bill, you know, I knew Bill Mollison in the beginning when he was starting out too. And he also, you know, he wasn't really studying that. He wasn't aware, as I had to be, working in the non-Western world. When this modern globalization took off, you know, the factories were leaving America, leaving Sweden, going off to India and China. And I was there seeing what they were creating, more pollution. But then the whole climate argument comes in and says, oh, look, we're cleaning up the environment, we've got sustainable development. Anyway, there's been a lack of understanding of the global system. And that's why not enough people understand the importance of localizing in human scale and human-dominated systems of a scale where nature and people see the impact of what they're doing. But, you know, we need to also understand that we need to warn with a little bit of fear, you know, like a tiny drop of fear, maybe. Yeah. Say, do you really want robots to be running the world? Do you want robots to look after the elderly? It's starting to happen, you know?
Yeah. There's two motivations, fear and love, joy and pain. And so and some people are only motivated by fear and pain. Some people are, you know, so yes, it's absolutely, what you're saying is 100% right.
I would also argue that for most people to have only the message of fear, 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 and no solution. In fact, I think I heard you say that. I think I heard you on, what program were you on? Were you on Del Bigby or something? I think you were saying how important it is not just to have a story of the fear, but so unless you can offer some kind of solution. And that's where I think our message is so powerful, because we do have an understanding and can articulate some of the problems with the dominant part, but we have this really broad, deep healing path, you know. So I definitely think that should always be there, side by side. But I think some people, yeah. Anyway, lots of love to both of you.
I love you. I'm excited. So I'll email you, and then I'm really excited to chat at your earliest convenience, and then we'll figure out integrating your message into our whole
okay.
life.
All right.
Thanks, Helena.
All
thanks,
right.
Jim.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody,
Bye-bye.
for attending. And
Thank
thanks,
you.
Justin. I know you're still there. Yeah,
Thanks.
everybody for staying late as well. So, yeah, thanks a lot. And we'll be talking. Take care.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao. Don't know how to turn it off.